think sometimes, especially if we're new to leadership, some of these concepts that we're learning can seem really abstract, or it might take us years and years and years to have any type of success when it comes to leading teams, big, small, somewhere in between. But it really just comes down to simplicity. And also, I want to encourage you that even if you do not have somebody leading you down the yellow brick road of leadership. You're not in any type of formal leadership. You don't have a mentor. You don't have anyone guiding you. Hopefully, you're on this channel and I'm able to help you along your leadership journey. But if you don't have any type of formal leadership training, and believe it or not, people don't typically even receive any type of formal leadership training until about 4 years in. That's about on average. The world is your oyster. There's plenty of information out there that is at your fingertips. So I highly recommend that you become a student of the world in the sense where you grab books, podcasts, articles. If you have access to like LinkedIn Learning courses, doing things like that to just get you up to speed and try and getting you developing some leadership skills. I would highly encourage if you're not in any type of formal leadership training. And if you are, those are great ways to be able to increase your skills as well. But I will say a lot of these skills, fundamental skills, are really at a basic human level. And on this channel, I say that we learn to lead ourselves well so we can serve others better. And this is a faith based channel. So ultimately, the goal here is to become, Jesus is the ultimate servant leader. When he was here in the flesh on earth, he was the ultimate servant leader. And this channel strives um, to develop our skills to be the type of servant leader that Jesus was on earth when he was here on earth, and to have those to bring the fruits of the spirit, to operate the same way that Jesus did, and the way that he calls us to operate even now through his word. And so those of you who have watched my videos before know that I'm reading Shrinking the Integrity Gap by Jeff and Tara Matson, and I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. And it is faith based, but even if you are not someone who subscribes to being a follower of Christ, it's again universal concept. So I believe anybody can get anything out of this, can get leadership concepts out of this and learn something and be able to implement it into your own leadership journey. And so I want to read an excerpt out of this. And the cool thing about this book is I am DISC certified. And what DISC is, it is like basically a personality test that we use in the workspace, and primarily within the space that I work at. We use it in a workspace, and it helps us to be able to determine different personality types. So how you basically show up in the workspace. And yes, it's going to tell you about your strengths, but it's also going to highlight your weaknesses. So basically, we can learn how to meet people where they're at. So it talks a lot about communication styles and what you need to be able to just be able to bridge the gap between different personality types. So then you're able to have better working relationships. And the cool thing about this book is it does not talk about DISC specifically, but it does talk about another like assessment, personality assessment called the CVI, which is called the core. Let me see. I think it's called the core value something. Hold on one second. Let me see where it was. Where is it? Okay, it's called the Core Values Index. And so the four core values profiles that they highlighted here. And I'm going to do more research because it really aligns with the different DISC styles. So if you're familiar with DISC or you've heard about DISC, this might actually really spark your interest. But it talks about the builder, the merchant, the banker, and the innovators. And the builders would be considered like the D style, the merchants, the I style, the innovators would be the S style, and then the bankers would be like the C style. I'm assuming just from based off what I am learning today. I am still doing more research, so I can't say that definitively, but just based off of what I've learned about it today, that's kind of lining up for what I know about DISC being certified. Anyways, I just thought that was so cool because it actually brought in a biblical aspect with the CVI, the Core Values Index, and related it to Jesus. And I've never seen that done before because using our modern day assessment tools and what we would implement in our workplaces. But the cool thing about this type of assessment is, yes, you can use it in your workplace, but it also your churches, merit, outside personality things. And I think with the assessment that I typically do within my workspace, we're mainly focusing on the workspace, even though you can do that within your personal life as well too. But I just thought it was really cool that they used that personality style and tie it into biblical concepts. I just thought it was so cool. But I want to read an excerpt in here just to highlight the foundational skills as leaders, how they really are at a basic human level. The things that we are learning, the things that we can do right now to increase our emotional intelligence. Because really and truly, and you may not know this, it might sound counterintuitive, and I think I might have talked about this in a previous video, that you actually need more emotional intelligence versus IQ over your intellectual intelligence, right? And you would think being a leader, being somebody who is managing teams or leading teams would need more of that IQ over the EQ. It's actually the reverse. You need more of that emotional intelligence. And that goes for even if you're just as an individual contributor role, more of that EQ. And so the excerpt that I'm going to read, I really just speaks to that. And so it just tells you that you don't have to wait for anybody to give you permission to start. You don't have to wait for anybody to deem you fit to start to develop these skills for yourself, especially if you have aspirations to become a leader. If you're at an individual contributor role, or for those of us who have been leading for some time now, it reminds us that not to forget about these skills, that these core skills that we should always have in the forefront of our mind about being human beings, because sometimes we're getting caught up with numbers and, different projects and getting things over the over the finish line and goalposts and projections and all the slang, I don't want to say slang, all the business and corporate lingo that we throw around. But what it really boils down to is the people, the teams, because if we don't develop those relationships, if we don't have strong working relationships with the people that are on our team. And it's not saying that we're going to sit down and have Thanksgiving dinner, but it does mean that we care enough to be able to really truly show that we care about them on a human level and care about their well-being, care about their success, and show up for them and support them, and that they actually genuinely know for a surefire fact that we will fight on their behalf, that we have their backs for real. Okay, so I'm going to read this excerpt, and just goes back to what I talk about on this channel about being Christ-led leaders, being using Jesus as our ultimate model as servant leaders. Okay. So it says to lead like Jesus often requires more time with an exposure, or excuse me, to lead like Jesus often requires more time with an exposure to our followers. And I'll say followers or team or whatever, insert whatever scenario that works for you. It says followers because we talked about followers in biblical print, like he's talking about like biblical reasons, like followers. So to lead like Jesus often requires more time with and exposure to our followers than we are willing to give. It means humility and growing to value people, not just their words and how they help us get to our destinations. Jesus models a kind of leadership that flips protocols on its head. It makes it a priority to affirm, value, and hear from others. He sees the heart. Leading well simply means listening well. And so, like I said, on this channel, I talk about leading ourselves well. And I wanted to focus on that piece. And I always talk about I let the Lord lead me to get on here every single day and share what message he wants me to talk about. And so I started reading my book a little bit earlier today, and he had me push a little bit further than what I would normally read. And all the way to get to that very last sentence, then he's like, talk about that. And so I just thought it was so interesting that last sentence said, leading well simply means listening well. And so this particular chapter was talking about the blind spots, and it talked a lot about the different communication styles. And it's centered around communication. And are we really truly listening to our team? Are we really truly seeking their feedback? And in the beginning of the chapter, it had a nice quote that I want to read. It said, leaders who refuse to listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing significant to say. And that quote's by Andy Stanley. And I think that is awesome, because if you shut your team down enough, if they don't feel heard enough, if you don't engage your team enough in conversation and they really truly understand that you care about their thoughts, their opinions, then they're not going to contribute. They're not going to contribute to the conversation. They're not going to bounce ideas off of each other. They're not going to share their ideas. They're not going to be collaborators. And so we really have to be mindful that, especially if we are some of those personality types who can be a little bit more direct. And, there's nothing wrong with having a plan. There's nothing wrong with, being able to make quick decisions and being very decisive. But also we have to realize, at what expense does that create? Okay. So being able to outsource some of that and say, hey guys, this is what's going on. I'm wanting our feedback. I'm wanting you guys to be a part of this, because of course, you being the leader, you're going to make the final call. But being someone who's been a part of very collaborative teams, I know what it is and what it feels like to be a part of that decision-making process, and being a part of companies who value hearing from their employees. Even though if you may not necessarily get that result, it is meaningful to know that your voice is being heard. And so we have a duty, we have a responsibility to seek out the opinions and the thoughts of our team. We really do. to be able to uncover, because honestly, let's keep it real. Sometimes we get a little blind, especially when we're doing the same thing. I don't want to say same thing day in and day out, but commonly we're going to be working towards a lot of the same things. We've got a lot of goals and stretch goals. And so sometimes we kind of get in a one track mind. And so our ideas get a little rusty. Okay. And so sometimes it's good to get fresh eyes on something. It's good to get fresh ideas and opinions on something. And another personality type are those, and what do they call them? Innovators, right? So bringing in those innovators on your team, people with different perspectives who can see things at a different angle. And we talk about, and that can go into the whole diversity on your team. But we're not going to talk about that right now. But just having the difference of opinions can help the team thrive, because it's not just you manning down the fort with all the ideas, right? But knowing that, hey, my boss cares about my opinion, and they might see some of those blind spots that you might miss because you're handling other things, you're delegating tasks and things like that. So they're kind of more at a ground level. So they're seeing things more regularly that you may not be privy to. And so they can call your attention to something. But if they don't think you care, or they don't think you care about their opinion, they might very well let it slip through the cracks. And it's not their fault. They're like, okay, well, I didn't know you cared about knowing if I had a solution to that. There might be some go-getters out there who might wave you down and might bring it to your attention. But then what would your response be if somebody said, hey, I think I have a solution. I see this problem here. And I think if we implemented this process or this solution, I think we could kind of clean it up over here and over here. But if you're not a receptive boss and you lop their head off, then do you think they're ever going to come to you again with a solution? No, they're going to keep quiet. So this really just boils down to emotional intelligence. And it can seem like emotional intelligence is easy to develop, and it does take practice. It takes being self-aware. It takes being mindful and having a focus on these things. So then you are actively seeking out opportunities to be able to implement these things. So then you can start to create these cultures. It was the other day, was it yesterday or the day before? I was talking about, being a culture champion on your team. So as you are doing things, as you're implementing these, as you're having these conversations and you're creating these cultures on your team, your reputation will precede you. People will be wanting to get on your team. You'll have other leaders coming to you like, how did you get your team to do this? And so you'll be able to come back and say, hey, outsourcing and the problem, and making it a collaborative effort. So I just wanted to share that with you today. I thought that was such an interesting piece, especially with me being DISC certified. It was just such a little like cupcake with icing and a cherry on top, just knowing that they were talking about just different personality types, even though it's a different assessment, and they were tying it to biblical principles. It just made my heart sing. So hopefully you were able to get something out of today's message. And I highly encourage you to keep watching some of my videos, especially if you're interested in learning more about leadership, because this is a faith-based channel, but I do talk about universal leadership concepts here. So please check out some of my other videos. My name is Tiffany. Here we're learning to lead ourselves well so we can serve others better. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll talk soon. Bye bye.